Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 14th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Hawaii's first congressional district. A congressional district that has voted for the Democratic Party for a very, very long time, with incumbent Representative Ed Case, who's been representing this district for over 6 terms now, who's running for re-election in the 2026 election, now facing a potential primary challenger. What we've heard so far is that Ed Case, as the incumbent, has every intention of running for re-election. He's not too old. He's not in a position that many voters want him to be stepping down or stepping by. He's about 72, and he's been doing quite well in this district, to say the least. In terms of overall performance, completely outperforming the top of the ticket, Kamala Harris won this district in the last election by about 25 percentage points. But taking a look at where he was in the actual House election, performing a lot better. In this first district in 2024, Ed Case won by 44% of the vote, a significant overperformance and one of the better performing Democrats according to the wins above replacement score, which essentially just says how much better do you perform in the election compared to how you were expected to. And so in the 2024 election, Ed Case outperformed the top of the ticket and outperformed with the wins above replacement score of Democrat plus 17.1. So why is it that he's facing a primary challenger in 2026? Well, it looks like it comes into really fundamentally what Democrats are looking for, which is new leadership across the board. I made a video yesterday actually talking about a surprise primary challenger in the state of Connecticut for the governor's race there against incumbent 2-term governor Ned Lamont, who is planning on running for a 3rd term. And so a state representative faced up and said, I want to run as a serious primary challenger to the incumbent Democratic governor in a way that Democrats really haven't seen in a very long time. Now, looking back to Hawaii in the last election, although it did go to the Democrats overwhelmingly, there actually was no substantive question about whether or not there was going to be a primary challenge in 2024. When you take a look at the race here, while there was, in theory, an opposition candidate, there wasn't anything major about it, and it certainly wasn't an elected official that would have invested the time and resources necessary to even come close to really challenging Ed Case in a primary. And while he is immensely popular, again, what this tells us is that he's actually winning a lot of Republican and independent votes across the board in the general election, and of course, winning the Democratic base. But in a Democratic primary, the voters there aren't exactly the same types of voters that might be giving you an overperformance in a general election. Very often, we've actually seen some Democrats who have been primaried or have lost primaries that were expected to perform better in general elections that end up losing in elections because they were more extreme in the eyes of the voters. Thinking about candidates who have been perceived as more progressive or more to the left, even if you don't agree personally that they are more extreme or whatever it might be, talking about Medicare for all, whatever it is, there are congressional districts where voters don't like discussion around Medicare for all. Right-leaning districts, Republican plus 10 districts that might be looking for someone who's more middle of the road, someone like Jared Golden, rather than someone who's more progressive. But in a district like Hawaii that is overwhelmingly Democratic, you would stand to reason that maybe there could be a Democrat there who isn't as moderate or anyone who's more close towards the center. Because although he is a significant overperformer, and that absolutely is something that can be celebrated and says that he knows how to win in the district, at the end of the day, this district is still overwhelming for the Democratic Party. And that's where he comes in. Jarrett Keokeole, who's running for Congress tentatively, still floating the idea, but chances are that he will run a state senator from Hawaii. Someone who's within the district and someone who is an elected official who actually had his own contested primary just years ago. And looking at the 2026 race, it is within a Democratic primary that the change can actually be made in a state like this one. A state that revolves around repeat politicians, and very similarly to Ed Case, who has done very well, but also has done quite well given his experience in the state. He's represented Hawaii in the House of Representatives. I don't know why I said Maine. I think I'm thinking coast to coast, completely far away from each other. But the point is that you're thinking about what he's done. He's been in office for quite some time. It wasn't just that he has been in the House of Representatives for a brief period of time. He actually was in the House of Representatives way earlier on. And so he decided to run again later down the line, around the time that Donald Trump was elected back into office, and he's been staying in the district. Now, he is popular, again, does very well amongst Republicans, independents, and Democrats alike, is very well respected in the community, and voters really, really like him. But like I said, if there was ever a moment to really challenge authority or make change in a state like this one, it's not in the general election. Republicans aren't going to win this district, and there is no incentive for a Democrat like Jarrett Kilko to say, I want to run as a Republican in the general election, even though I'm a registered Democrat. It is a Democratic primary that is also, too, more conducive to electing someone who's a bit more towards the left rather than someone who's more towards the center, because this district is overwhelmingly Democratic. The argument around electability can be made successfully, and I think rightfully so. Democrats, for the most part, have been very pragmatic in their choices in candidates across the board. Thinking about Maine's 2nd District, Jared Golden is the only Democrat who could win there because he is more moderate. He's more tempered, and he votes with the Republican Party in moments where it does make a difference for the constituents in this district that voted for Trump 3 times in the past presidential elections. It is people like Jared Golden that stand to reason that they can actually win in a district like this one. It's also senators like Elisa Slotkin, who outpaced Kamala Harris and won in a state that Democrats lost on the presidential level. It's their argument that because she was more moderate and had background experience in the CIA, and that she had a story that voters in Michigan preferred to her opponent Mike Rogers, that is the reason that she was more electable. And I understand it. Democrats should be pragmatic. In the 2024 election, they lost a lot. They might have gained seats in the House, but fundamentally on the presidential level, losing 7 out of 7 battleground states is a wake-up call. And losing in states like Pennsylvania, yet again, another wake-up call. And Democrats should look at that and say, how did they move forward? Well, yes, you can run moderate candidates. But when it comes down to districts like Hawaii's 1st, maybe you don't necessarily need that. While it is always good to think about candidates who can outpace the top of the ticket, again, the top of the ticket winning by 25 points, there really isn't that much to worry about. And that's where this comes in. Fox News even calls Ed Case a moderate because, for all purposes, he is. That's why he does so well in the district amongst Republicans and independents. But if Democrats in the primary do fundamentally want something new, and Ed Case, who is popular amongst Democrats, but is on the side where he's been in office since 2018, and if voters feel like they want someone more progressive, as they actually have voted in the past, 2016, in the Democratic primary, went overwhelmingly to Bernie Sanders, no shock as to why that has happened, it's very possible that Ed Case is caught sleeping. This is another example of, while there may not be a successful challenge here in this race, Ed Case is going to have an opponent. Jarrett Kilko isn't just saying, I want to run because, I'm another Democrat and this is a viable alternative. He's running, and he's likely going to run to the left of Ed Case. And thinking about the types of voters that vote in a congressional district like this one, an overwhelmingly Democratic district, electability will not be the first thing top of mind, because no matter who votes or how they vote, ultimately, the Democrats are going to come out ahead in Hawaii's 1st district. So they actually might be voting way more on policy and substance rather than just whether or not you can win a general election. And that's where it will be interesting, because Ed Case really hasn't faced a substantive primary challenger in quite some time. Looking back in 2024, wasn't competitive. Looking back at 2022, also likewise not competitive. Looking back at 2020, presidential election, similarly not competitive. 2018 was the year which Ed Case had won in. But when you take a look at the district here, keeping in mind, Ed Case had represented this district before, won by about 15 points in a multi-way race, got about 40% of the vote when there were 7 candidates on the ballot. So obviously, 2018 being the closest primary that he has had, has put him in a position where there really isn't much to worry about. Thinking about the cash on hand, about $396,000, sure, that's something. But if you could find a Democratic opponent who could go viral on Twitter and raise a crap ton of money that way, that's certainly possible that you see a viable primary alternative for Democrats in this state. And while I still think Ed Case, more likely than not, would win this race, as most incumbents do, it stands to be yet again, just by coincidence, but yet again, another example of a congressional district, of an election where a mainstream Democrat, who might have been representing this district arguably well and also is popular, still facing an opponent within their state or district. The video I made yesterday about Ned Lamont facing a primary challenger in the state of Connecticut isn't something that is happening because Ned Lamont is significantly unpopular. In fact, that's simply not the case. 62% of voters have a favorable view of Ned Lamont as their governor. But within the Democratic primary, there is a very real possibility that while he might be popular, people are still looking for a different vision. You can be so popular and still lose your election if voters are just fundamentally at odds with your legislating policy. Now, I'm not saying that is particularly the case with Ed Case, but there's a reason why a state senator is choosing to give up their district and run for House of Representatives, because they believe in the pathway for themselves and for the future of the party because of what they represent. Kilko running in this race would be 41 years old, categorically younger than Ed Case. Not that age is going to be the biggest issue of this election, but that will be a huge juxtaposition. Not to mention, too, that he is going to be likely running as a more progressive alternative in this race, and it will be very interesting to watch. What we're seeing here is that ultimately, Kilko is saying that voters are fed up, saying that they're looking for something new, and that he would potentially be that alternative. That is how he runs in this race. And while I think Ed Case, again, as a popular incumbent, would more likely than not win re-election, it is always interesting to see that primaries like this are exactly how you get caught sleeping. Thinking about what happened with AOC back in 2018, I remember that race was interesting. I remember that no one really covered it. No one really thought it would be competitive until it was. Let's see if we can actually find the district, if we can figure our way around the congressional districts in New York. But when you get to the 14th district in this Democratic primary, there was no expectation that this race was going to be quite competitive. And so when you take a look too, Kirsten Gillibrand, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Andrew Cuomo, very big names at the time in the city of New York and in the state of New York, endorsing Joseph Crawley, you would expect him to win. He had been in this position for a very long time. I mean, you're talking a very, very long time. Joe Crawley ended up in this position in the House of Representatives, representing it from 1999. Bill Clinton was president. This was one of Bill Clinton's midterms. And so 20 years later, it is AOC in a Democratic primary who takes him down, not a Republican in a general election, because this district was overwhelmingly for the Democrats. And so AOC just had to win the Democratic primary to actually win the general election, and that was how the change was made. And now, AOC is one of the biggest names in the House Democratic Caucus. And while I'm not saying that, Jarrett Kilko in Hawaii is AOC, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, though, is that it is moments like this, and it is primary challengers like this, that stand to be in a position where they could, in some cases, win in a district where no one was expecting them to do so. And it speaks to the broader message that Democrats are sending nationwide. In New York, in Connecticut, in Hawaii, and across this country, that they are looking for something new. And while Ed Case very well may survive this primary challenge and may not even be the rightful subject of a primary challenge, there is this surge in engagement from disaffected Democrats and Democrats who represent a different vision of the political party that is currently in office, that represent a different vision from what their incumbents have had to offer for decades on end. And while this case in particular may not be indicative of that, but also maybe, I'm not from the district and I don't know the polling to a T to every degree around the first district. What I do know is that Ed Case certainly has an electability argument. But in a district that Kamala Harris won by 25 and Biden won by more, I don't know how well that stands up in this election. And I don't know how well that stands up to the primary voters that might like Ed Case, but still want a future vision for their party. And so it'll be interesting to watch. We will cover it. We will see. But as of right now, it looks like it's going to be an interesting race when it really didn't have to be in the first place for many different districts had Democrats won the last election, had they won House control. But clearly coming off of 2024, something has changed in the way that Democrats at large view their elected officials and view response to the president. Because while it may have been very different under a President Kamala Harris, Donald Trump is the president today, and pushback against him is ever more important for the Democratic base and constituency. And that's what they're looking for. And in some cases, they may not be looking for a moderate, but rather a progressive, or just someone who they see as a fighter. And while they may still re-elect Ed Case, it is absolutely notable that he's facing a real primary challenger for the first time since he's been back in Congress. That means something, and it speaks to that broader point I was talking about already, about national politics with Democrats, and what we could likely see as a trend over the next few months and potentially a year as Democrats get into competitive primaries that they might not have even expected in the first place. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.